Hi, everybody. I'm Tamara Zoner.
And I'm John Davis.
Welcome to Spirit Cafe.
Come in, sit down, and
grab a cup of love.
A Spirituality Without the Guilt podcast. Hey, guys, it's John Davis, and I am also known in the world as Triple X because I got 3 of them. And, that being said, Tamara and I have talked about a very specific topic, and I think it's an interesting topic to dive into. Is spiritual compatibility important or not in relationships? And so today I'm going to be speaking with my lovely co-host, my cohort in crime, Miss Tamara Zoner. Hi, Tamara. How are you today?
Hey, John. I'm good. Glad to be here. How are you?
I am tired. I'm actually, I'll be honest with you. I'm really ready for a nap. It's one of those days. I've had my 2 giant mugs of coffee, and I've got iced tea right here, and the caffeine's just not doing it today for some reason.
All right. Maybe you need to jump around, have a little dance party or something.
No, I think I need to sleep. So spiritual compatibility. I have a friend who, very profoundly spiritual person. And her husband is very profoundly not. And they've been together for a long, long time. They have great moments. They love certain things, but they very much keep to their lane when it comes to spirituality. And some of the issues that they seem to have, if that's good English or not, I don't know. Some of the issues they do have. God, phew, man, I am tired.
You do need to nap.
I do, baby. I do. Comes down to not spirituality itself, but the way we live our life spiritually, right? So I know what for me spiritually, I really want to be in relationships with people who are spiritually compatible because of the fact that I think spirituality also dictates your morals and your actions. And I want people who are in alignment with that. But is it really that important? What do you think?
It's a coin toss. I do agree about that compatibility, but I do think that there are really good human beings out there that don't identify as spiritual people, and they live the same values. The people that I'm closest to, when in particular my best friend, she wouldn't identify as a very spiritual person necessarily. She's still trying to really understand what her belief is. And so she's constantly kind of looking at that and questioning things and piecing it together. But her values and the way that she lives her life are very much in line with mine, which is why we're best friends.
Right.
And so I think you can have people in your lives that don't share your same spiritual practices or beliefs as long as the values are aligned. I think maybe that's the important piece. Now, that said, did you want to comment before I move on?
No. You are being brilliant. This is the beginning of my nap. Go ahead.
That said, I feel like it's like a cake, which I often compare relationships to a cake.
So now I'm not only tired, but I'm hungry. Thank you so much.
So sorry. You can have like this beautiful cake. It's got all the pieces in to make it delicious. And the icing will make it even better, right? You don't need the icing, but the icing makes it better. And shared spiritual beliefs are like icing on the cake. They make it sweeter. They make it, well, that would be a weird, I'm not going to say that. They make it richer. They make it deeper. And so those bites that you take are even better, because otherwise it's just cake and you're eating it alone.
Oh, wow. That's good analogy right there. What I find interesting about the whole thing is, first of all, it's really subjective, because there are some people who are just totally like, whatever, you're fine. That's great. And which is the way I prefer to live my life. Is, I don't judge anybody for what they believe, unless their beliefs are harmful. Then I judge them, and I'm proud to judge them if they're doing harmful and hateful things, right? Judge not lest you shall be judged, unless they're doing crap. right. So that they forgot that it was part of the editing process. Um, but when I look at relationships in general, I think that each person has a different take on what relationship is, and it when it comes to spiritual compatibility, I know, I've dated Jewish women, I've dated Greek women, I've dated lots of different types of women. I've dated black women, I've dated lots of different people, because I don't look at them as that thing. I look at them as that person.
Mhm.
Um, but I do find that when one of them has a very predominantly religious view as opposed to spiritual view, religious view,
Mhm.
it can definitely get in the way of a relationship. I know that there's some who are so devout, and it always sounds like I'm trashing Christianity. I'm not. I believe in Christianity exactly like Gandhi believes in Christianity. Gandhi says, "I love your Jesus. I don't like your Christians." Anyway, right. But I think that when you have someone who is so when you're involved with somebody whose spiritual belief is a religion that is so closed, then you've created polarity.
Mhm.
And it really, a good relationship has to be a give and take. When I look at relationships in general, you know um, I don't believe in codependent relationships, because I think that one person is going to get sicker and tired because they're carrying the other. I
Mhm.
think a relationship should be two people who decide to walk side by side through life, enhancing each other's experience, right? And so,
Mm.
and I think that it's much easier to enhance somebody else's life if you're both spiritually compatible, because
I would agree with that. Yeah.
right, because you have similar beliefs, and because that is part of your focus, you'll see the same things. Does that make sense? I guess.
It does to me, because as you're going along, if you're with someone who doesn't believe the same things as you at all, when you're like, for me, when I'm making meaning about experiences and it doesn't make sense to them, well, then again, it feels like a distance is created, right? So I'm creating this meaning, everything means something. I practice gratitude, I do this and this and this. And if they're calling that woo woo, then it just, you feel, I have felt isolated and alone within the relationship because I can't share this with them. And that doesn't feel good. So you don't have to have all the same beliefs, but I do think it definitely creates a sweetness. Whether it's you being very religious, if you're a Christian, if you're Jewish, like look at the Jewish religion and all of their beautiful, beautiful traditions and ceremonies. And, you know, if you have a person who's not participating in that, it loses something. If you're participating in two different religious things, if you're coming from two different backgrounds and you both have a deep investment in those, then I think that can work because you both have a faith and you can try to understand one another and share it with one another and bring both pieces to the table. But if one doesn't have any at all, to me it feels a lot harder.
Yeah, yeah. And what's interesting, what you just said to me is fascinating, because what you basically were describing a little bit earlier was conditional rather than unconditional love. If
Mm,
somebody's calling your process woo woo, and it means you can't share it, that's a condition.
mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the condition that's been put on the relationship. I'm going to mock you for your beliefs or not. And
Right.
that does not mean that two people can't be in a great relationship and one person is very spiritual or religious and the other one's not, and they don't mock each other and they treat each other fairly and lovingly. But there are those moments that where like, especially if they're in a very dogmatic religion, where a lot of a lot of those dogmatic religions specifically say their job is to convert people,
Oh,
you know,
right.
and
Oh,
so why aren't you doing this? My father is a prime example. My father was not Catholic when he met my mom. He had to
okay.
convert to
Okay.
date my mom, right?
Okay.
So he had to become a Catholic to date my mom. And so there was a whole bunch of changes there. My godmother, Adele Cafatelli, she
Great name.
obviously Irish, right? She was from Sicily. She is from Sicily. She's 96 right now, 95 right now.
Wow.
She's still around. I called her Aunt Dell, right? Aunt Dell. Her husband, known as Uncle Squint, and his name was Squint because he had a condition where his eyes were constantly closed, so he'd go through life like this,
Oh, goodness.
right? And then he had surgery later and opened it back up, but he'd go through life and his head was always leaned back, and so they called him Squint,
Oh, gosh.
right? So he was Uncle Squint. Uncle Squint was not allowed to be my godfather because he was not Catholic.
Okay.
Now, what's really interesting is I ended up having a godfather who was a Catholic, was going to the church with my mom, so had that very spiritual thought. I saw him one time in my life, and I don't mean the time when he stood up for me at my baptism. I mean when I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
He came down to visit relatives of his that were a block and a half away from my parents' house, and I was dating their daughter. And he gets to the house. He says, "I want to see my godson." And he walked in. He says, "How you doing?" I'd never met the man.
Oh, my
Never,
gosh.
never heard or saw him again.
Wow.
Right. Meanwhile, Uncle Squint took me to theme parks, and he took me on the beach with his Jeep and with his Scout, International Scout. But we was, I mean, I did crabbing and fishing with Uncle Squint, right? So he was
Right.
more of a godfather, but
Yeah.
they made it work, Aunt Dell and Uncle Squint, because she was a Italian Catholic and he was not, right? And they are still together and a happy couple and have kids, and they're both in their 90s and they're like living their life,
Oh, that's great. That's great.
So they've been able to make it work. So, but I guess it really comes down to the subjective belief, if you believe it can work or not, or what do you want in your own personal experience? What do you want to create in your personal experience? I've had in my three X's, which love that name, triple X baby, right? My three X's were very interesting. My first wife, I jokingly always say, was a rebound from my second, and the reason I say that is because I was engaged to my second, and we broke up, and I got married to somebody else, and then broke up with her and came back to the first one and got married to her, right? But the first woman I married, she had a lot of very serious emotional things, severely bipolar, lots of various things of that nature. And me being a person who always was one of the struggles I've had in life is I always want to be the person to help and save people basically when I was younger, especially. And so I got into that relationship, and it was 11 months before we parted ways with some infidelity involved. But so then I married my second wife, who was my son's mother. And so the first wife wasn't at all spiritually compatible.
Okay.
She was very much a Christmas and Easter, not Catholic, Episcopalian.
Okay.
Okay. So my second wife, who is the one that my son's mother, it's a baby mama, right? right, baby mama.
Yes.
She wasn't really religious or hugely spiritual at all. But her family was Syrian Orthodox.
Okay.
And when we got married, they were okay with me being a Catholic because that's what I was raised as, because they're sort of the same thing. So
Okay.
I had a Syrian Orthodox wedding in a park, which was very lovely. But in the end, it came down to the idea of she wasn't living spiritually or in spiritual principles, which is more important than really spiritual principles. It was all about her and all about her own self-gratification. And so it became very damaging in the relationship because everything was about her. And, oh, I don't like this now, so you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
You're
That's not
not
gonna work.
you're not allowed to was a big one. I went to Peru with my friend Michael, and the 12 apostles mean a great deal to me because of various reasons. But my friend Michael and I have a shared experience in that realm. And when we were in Peru, there was an artist who was carving stone on the side of the road. There was this medallion that represented the 12 apostles. And my friend Michael bought it for me as a gift. And I thought that was really lovely. And I brought it home and I was like, that's so cool. And I hung it from the mirror in my car. And my wife says, you're not allowed to hang that in your car. I go, why? She says, because it looks like a Jewish cross. And I'm Syrian.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, that's anti-Semitism right there. you know what I mean? That's what that is, right? Mm-hmm. She didn't. When I told her that, she said, no, it's not. Yeah, it is, because that's not what it represents, So that spiritual incompatibility right there did not fit with me, right?
Right.
After she left, I was really done because both of those first relations ended up with infidelity. And so it was very much a thing where I was done. I was way done. And so I went off and I decided I'm going to just go live my life and not going to. And 5 or 6 years went by and I was doing a lot of meditation and really delving deep into my spirituality. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, I really would like to have a girlfriend, and ended up connecting with a friend of mine that I'd known for years and years. And when we connected, it was so much fun and so easy. And it very quickly devolved into I heard her one time saying to a friend of hers, she said, what's John like? She said, he's useful.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah. And that's what I said. Ouch. Right. And the more we delved into that's how she felt. It was all about what use she could get out of me. And so that's why my last marriage ended with infidelity, and because she found somebody that was more useful, right? So I've had three who have not been really faithful to me, and so to me, one of the worst things you can do to somebody who is loving you unconditionally, because I gave up myself in all three of those wet marriages because I felt that's what you're supposed to do, and but none of them were spiritually compatible with what I was believing and what I was seeing in my life. And so, of course, they're, in my opinion, in my subjective experience, of course, they were going to fail because we weren't in alignment. We weren't working side by side together. And but I think you can work side by side together with somebody who's doesn't believe the same things as you. As long as you're being loving.
If they're supportive of you, if they're encouraging, not that you're not allowed to. I mean, I grew up, my dad wasn't religious at all, and he's not Catholic. I don't even, how little religious he is. I don't even know, I can't even remember what religion his parents were, because they didn't practice anything and they didn't go to church. So my dad would come to church when required by my mother on Christmas once in a while. But she was very Catholic, as we've talked about, and she raised us Catholic, and he just always let her have that realm. And it was never that was her job. That was her area. And he always supported her in that. And it was never an issue that their religious differences or lack thereof were an issue at all. And I didn't baptize my children because I was already recovering.
Right.
And my ex-husband is not religious at all. He was also born, baptized Catholic. But it wasn't a part of our relationship, because even though we were both baptized and both raised Catholic, we know how that religion goes. It's a lot of fluff and not a lot of substance. And we had varying beliefs on, the spiritual aspects. So, well, and also his talk doesn't line up with his walk. So that for me was like, this is no, not working out. You can't say this, but do that. It doesn't work. So that never felt supported, but we didn't baptize the kids. I wanted them to figure out their own beliefs. So I share mine with them, but they get to just figure it out along the way. Now, I am a godmother to one of my nephews, and that's allowed because I'm technically Catholic. I haven't been rejected from the church.
Right, right.
Even though there are many reasons for them to officially kick me out.
I find that just ridiculous. The whole not your part, the part of you haven't been kicked out by the Catholic Church. I've been divorced 3 times,
right.
and I know 100% that if I met a Catholic right now, they would forgive all that.
Probably. Well,
to put
maybe
me
as long
back
as
in
you're
the
at a
fold.
Catholic wedding, which I didn't do that either. I
Right.
was
They would
married
put
by
you
a
back in the
female
fold.
minister in a non-denominational chapel.
Right. And like my second marriage was an Eastern Orthodox. You're not allowed to get married outside of a church building.
Okay.
We got married in a park. The priest
Oh.
said, "Okay, I forgive it. You're allowed."
Oh, wow.
Like,
But did the church
anyway,
recognize it? I don't know.
right, yeah.
So, but with not baptizing my kids, I still wanted them to have like some spiritual guidance. So we still assigned godmothers and godfathers, but I call my sister is my oldest, and I call her spirit mama. Like, this is your spirit mama. This is who, this is who you can rely on if I'm not available to you.
Right, right.
Doesn't really happen in practice because we live too far away from each other, but
right.
we're there for each other and our kids.
Right. That makes sense. And we talk about spiritual compatibility for, when you're looking at people who have gone down a very religious / spiritual pathway, and they expect various things. When my son was born, they wanted to circumcise him. And I said, why? Why would I do that to my son? Tell me why. And they're like, well, hygiene, blah, 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 blah. So I went to my Greek Orthodox friend, and I said, hey, Tim, I know you're not. Tell me about it. And he gave me the whole skinny on that. And he's like, let me just say this, John. He says, you have gone through, like, my son was born with a midwife, and we did the whole natural birth, and we did all the stuff, right?
Okay.
He says, you're going through all these natural practices and doing all these things. Why would you do this unnatural thing to your child? And then when you dive into the history of why everyone gets circumcised, it's because Jewish doctors wanted everyone to be thought of as a Jew, so that they wouldn't be put to death in the Holocaust. So Jewish doctors started circumcising everybody because they used to be able to tell who was Jewish and who was not by their circumcision.
Right.
And so it kind of jumped into mainstream medical stuff. I was like, it makes no sense whatsoever. You were born with that.
Right. Our bodies naturally know how to protect ourselves. So
right. So
yeah.
So my wife struggled with it. At the time, she struggled with it because Eastern Orthodox said, not Eastern Orthodox. Was it? Well, she had to struggle with it. That's all I can say. I don't know what the religious balance. Yeah. She went back and forth and back and forth, back and forth. I was like, I don't think you should. I said, my friend Tim is Eastern Orthodox. He's Greek, so he didn't have it done. So, but there was deep discussions about it, and I was like, this is just stupid. Well, the whole idea of it's stupid.
It is. It's a cosmetic thing, and why would I put my child through that kind of pain minutes after they're born?
Right.
Or a day or two. It's unnecessary, and I absolutely agree with you there.
So I guess we all went off on a weird tangent there, but
episode.
but when you're dealing with a relationship, and one person believes in all those dogmatic traditions and ceremonies, and you don't, that makes it a very hard roadblock to get past, because you're gonna argue, and like, I'm a firm believer in pro-choice. I believe that you should have choice. My choice is not to do it, right? But I don't condemn anybody else because I just don't believe that way, right? And I've had, I've had arguments with people who's like, well, then you're blah 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 blah. No, I'm not condemning you for your beliefs. I like kids, you know. It's
Right.
just,
It's just if you were in that particular situation, you would prefer a certain outcome.
right.
And what you're saying is that everybody can make that decision for themselves. And that's what we should have the right to do. We should have the right to make that decision for ourselves with our own bodies. And I do also agree that the father could have some say, but he doesn't get much of the say early on
Hmm.
because it's our body.
Right. Right.
Um, well,
And quite, and quite honestly, when I got to the point in my life where I decided that I like sex more than kids, I had a vasectomy, right? So, I mean, because it's just the most kind thing that I could do, rather than bring another child into the world who,
absolutely.
and so,
That you don't want
right,
for
right,
sure.
and the thing is, what I wanted, I absolutely would love it and want it and love it and
Of
all that stuff.
course.
However, I also know that I would have a hard. It would be hard.
Mhm.
It'd be difficult, and so having someone who is not spiritually compatible on a topic like that.
Yes. And I would definitely say that when kids come into play, that becomes even more important
Hmm.
because, people always say, oh, kids bring out the best in you and blah, blah. No, they don't.
Yeah.
Kids bring out the worst in you and your relationship. So if you're not aligned with one another before you have kids, it's just most often going to deepen the divide after kids, which is what happened in my relationship because
Mm.
we were not on board with how we wanted our children to grow up and what we wanted them to believe. And like, I'm super open-minded and quite liberal. And I'm an embrace every human being kind of a person. And I embrace the multiple identities that are out in the world today. And I embrace you being who you are and loving who you love and all the confusing bits and pieces of being a human being. And my ex doesn't. You're
Hmm.
this or that and nothing in between. And although sometimes he proves himself wrong and shows up as a better human for his kids once in a while. So there's
Mm.
that. But there's so much that goes into our belief system that if we're not supporting one another in a relationship, it's just going to be harder than it already. Relationships can be hard. I hate to say relationships are hard because that's a belief, but relationships require a tremendous amount of devotion and energy and attention. And if you're believing completely different things and don't feel like you can come together in support of one another in those beliefs, it's going to feel a lot harder.
Yeah, I no, I completely agree. And like I said, having been through three where
Yeah.
I don't think we are spiritually compatible
Mhm.
on lots of levels, um, not just dogmatically, but just on basic spiritual morality.
Yeah.
I don't think I would never in my life I couldn't imagine myself cheating
Mhm.
because it goes
Mhm.
against everything I believe.
Right.
If I am giving my unconditional love means there's no condition, right?
Yeah,
And so if you're looking for it outside of your relationship, then there's a condition there of
for
some of
sure.
some variety, right? So
Yeah.
to me, that's a spiritual morality issue between two people, because
Absolutely.
I couldn't imagine. And I tell my son, and he has no idea what happened with me and his mother, but I tell him, when you start dating and you start doing this stuff, you realize the most hurtful and harmful thing you can ever do to a person is cheat on them,
Mhm.
because it hits on such deep core pieces of themselves that it really damages the person, and they will struggle with it for a while.
Yeah. Well, and there's a weakness there if you're turning to someone else instead of communicating
And
what.
that's really a great way to go with this conversation, because in spiritual versus not spiritual,
Mhm.
it's the communication between the two that matter. It's a
Right.
matter of, can we talk about what I believe without you judging it? Can you
Yeah.
talk about the fact that you don't believe without me judging you? Can we
Right.
create that sort of safe place where we're just safe with each other?
That
or
right there.
right, or are we going to struggle all of our life with very different beliefs because we aren't communicating? And,
Right.
I'll tell you flat out, all three of my relationships had communication issues.
Yeah.
I had
Of
no
course.
idea.
That's
So
why you're divorced.
right, right, right.
I
I had no idea some of the issues that they had until, long after
mean,
we were done.
yeah.
So, I mean, that to me is also, and in the beginning is the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. So you need to start with talking.
Absolutely. And you know what? When you get past the talking part and you get to the really fun bits, spirituality, being aligned spiritually in the bedroom also is an amazing thing, because then those experiences become spiritual, and sex on a spiritual level is beyond anything just physical pleasure, right? When you connect on that spiritual level, like, holy crap, that's amazing. So if you can align, do.
Yeah. Well, it's like 4D. It's another level
Mhm.
of intimacy. That whole, not only am I there in that moment to have that, very pleasurable experience, but
Mhm.
I'm there to share that love with you, and to have you help you have your very pleasurable experience, have it
Mhm.
be mutual.
Right. And you can
It's
go to a different level. It's like a form of meditation, right? You go beyond the physical and
right.
you enter this ethereal realm. I've been following a particular teacher in that area for the past several months, and she really talks about how much healing occurs through a romantic relationship, and the physical aspect, and surrendering and opening to one another, and
Mm,
being willing to let go and have that bigger experience, because we grow so much when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. And that thing you said about being safe, like, to create a level of safety for your partner to be that with you, is just beyond the normal everyday relationship. And
right.
that is what I seek in my relationships, for sure.
Right. And it's interesting, because if that spiritual safe place is only being given by one,
Then it isn't a
when
safe place.
right, and the interesting thing about that one is I've been in that spot where I saw nothing coming. I saw no issues. I saw we had our struggles here and there, but in my mind, we're a couple, and we're going to have struggles together, and we're going to go through them together. Right.
Mhm.
This is how I saw it, not how she saw it. Right. And so, because of that idea of that, um, she wasn't giving a safe space. Right.
Mhm.
I was giving everything I could for her to have a safe space, but she wasn't accepting a safe space, and she
And she
wasn't
may have
willing.
not had one within herself.
Right, and that's exactly it. That's
Yeah,
exactly it.
we have to find a safe place within ourselves before we can open to others, in
Right,
even if you're providing that safe space. We have to be willing to step into it.
right. And the we often talk about the definition of spirituality, but it really comes down to the core essence of your authentic self,
Mhm.
right, and your oneness with whatever yada yada is, right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And so that core essence of oneself, that authentic person, and being your full authentic person. And what's really interesting is that a lot of people can't do that. They
Mhm.
can't allow themselves, because of the traumas of their lives, who's told them what a terrible person they are, or how they can't do anything, or they're poor, and they're lacking, and they're blah 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 blah. And you know, it's interesting, because, as I often say, spirituality is a personal journey. But when you find someone who can walk along that personal journey beside you, in alignment, and in feeling that that safe space that you
Mhm.
both create,
Mhm.
oh my god, oh my
Right?
god, it's the greatest thing in the world, right.
Yes,
And
it is.
I feel like I've come close to touching that a couple of times. I don't think I've ever really gotten that, right.
I have the absolute honor of being witness to a couple like that, and
Mm,
they are phenomenal. And the way that they show up for each other is so beautiful. I'm kind of always joking. Everybody needs a Troy because that's my friend's husband's name. And, you know, she's very open about having had a very traumatic upbringing. And he always makes sure she's safe. He just fully accepts everything about her, adores everything about her, and is able to be that mirror for her and that safety for her. And so in turn, she is able to do that for him as often as she can. And it's such a beautiful, it's one of the relationships I always like to call my model relationships that prove to me that those kinds of relationships exist in the world and are therefore possible for me too. They're one of those. Like, it's so fulfilling, so vulnerable, so beautiful. It's a very rare, gem in all the
It is.
relationships.
You're absolutely right. It is very, very rare, and it's really one of the interesting reasons as to why, I haven't dated anybody in almost 7 years now, just because of the fact that I I'm not willing to compromise anymore.
Right, but how will you know what you have to compromise unless
Well,
you tried it?
I believe in the Nietzschean approach that to truly have a lasting, loving relationship, you have to know the person as a friend and foster the friendship first.
Mm.
And so I have many, anybody who knows me knows that most of my friends are women, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of guys don't really understand me because of the fact that I am a spiritual guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot. I'm a spiritual guy who does stunts and sword fights, right? I hang out with testosterone laden guys all the time, right?
Right.
They don't necessarily dive into the spirituality aspect of
Mm-hmm.
it. But as I go through my life, I realize very much that that's what my future is doing more and more of my spiritual work, more and more of my spiritual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of my friends are women. And the reason that is because I feel like we can have real talks, real conversations,
Yes,
and I feel that I find women are more open that way on those topics. But
definitely.
what's really interesting to me is I don't when I say I don't compromise, it means when I meet somebody and I automatically start to see the red flags,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to go down that road.
Right. No, that's wise. Like,
Right.
I mean, that is definitely a protective measure, and we need to have some of those in place. It's
Right.
okay to have some of those in place. So, if
And
if
my last 7 years haven't been lonely.
yeah,
I-
okay.
I'm not, I am very full and complete within myself. And
Mm-hmm.
that to me is the most important thing. Spiritual journey means being your authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And my authentic self, I've been married, I've been married 3 times, right? I've got a kid, right? I'm not, I'm not looking to get married again per se.
Mm-hmm.
Would
That's
I?
good because it would ruin the nickname. We don't want
Right,
that.
right, right. Nobody wants
I
to talk.
mean, it might not ruin the nickname if you get it,
It-
if you get the
well,
good one.
well,
You
I'll
can
tell you
sing
what.
for
I'll
flex.
tell you what. I will definitely not rush into another wedding, and that is the one thing.
Well,
But
that is good.
to me, it's important that whoever I would get involved with, if I got involved with somebody, that we would have to be really clear and open and authentic with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I've ever had that. I don't think I've ever really had someone who's completely authentic. I remember
Mm-hmm.
my friend Michael when I married my third wife. Um, he said to me 2 days after the wedding or something like that. He said, "Yeah, I'm really looking forward to meeting Kelly." Well, he had already met her, but he thought she was putting up a false front,
Mm-hmm.
and she was.
Mm-hmm.
She absolutely was. So I mean, he was very profoundly aware of what was going on, and I was really not, you know, because I allowed myself to go into that place of, I've been alone for 5 years. I'm desperate, blah 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 blah. Right? I don't go there anymore.
That's
you know,
good. That I support you in that, John.
I have learned quite a bit in my life. So,
Yes,
but spiritual compatibility is huge, and I think for me, but like I said, it's subjective. People can absolutely have great relationship with people who aren't on the same spiritual journey, but
absolutely.
Yeah, I
I
think it's
just think
great.
it makes the cake sweeter if there's
I
alignment.
I agree. I agree. So, well, we have done well. I think
All right.
this is a unique topic.
Yeah, it was. And yes, thank you for following along, people who are still listening at the end of this as we kind of took different paths, but that's what relationships do. They take different pathways, and we have to be willing to hang on for the ride if we want to see it through to the end. So we'd love to hear your comments about this topic and tell us what you think, and maybe share your relationship. If it's a spiritual one, share it with us. We'd love to hear, so that we can inspire one another, and John can know for sure that those exist in the world.
It's a
And me.
myth. It's a myth.
So, as always, we're so grateful for you being with us, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. And you'll hear us again. Have an amazing day.
Thank you for joining us at Spirit Cafe, a place where you can safely explore your spirituality without the guilt or dogma of religion. Leave all comments and suggestions on the Spirit Cafe podcast Facebook page.